employees, not applicants. When trade union representatives integrated into the interview framework, there already exists an ominous risk that they may be partially towards the candidates affiliated with their union. You are already creating an atmosphere that corruption should exist, my opponents. This prospect could lead to a situation where qualified candidates are unjustly sidelined in favor of those with union connections, ultimately impacting an organization's productivity and equity. In your so-called interest of justice, we must also acknowledge the vital principle of individual autonomy. This motion subscribes a one-size-fits-all approach, disregarding the vast spectrum of candidate preferences and comfort levels concerning union involvement, infringing upon an individual's prerogative to decide whether or not they desire such union representation during their interview and previous transgression against their rights and interests that you say the trade union will represent. Furthermore, we must heed undeniable practical ramifications of incorporating trade union representatives into hiring interviews. The process of scheduling, coordinating, and managing additional participants in these proceedings undeniably bestows a bureaucratic burden upon the employers. This in turn may slow down the hiring process, rendering it less efficient for the employers and potentially exasperating for the candidate. In conclusion, we reiterate our profound appreciation for the vital role that trade unions play in championing work rights and working conditions. However, the proposal to include trade union representatives in hiring interviews is progressing concern. We stand resolutely by the principles of meritocracy, confidentiality, and individual autonomy. To permit trade union participation in interviews is to invite a conundrum that threatens to complicate and undermine the integrity of the hiring process. In light of these concerns, we earnestly implore that this assembly rejects the motion. The opposition reads.
Thank you, second opposition speaker. We'll move now to hear the case from the third proposition speaker.
Can you hear me?
Yes, just elevate your voice some more so we could hear you better.
Okay, so I'll begin by restating the point that this House believes that as trade union representatives should be present at all hiring interviews. We're in full support of the motion, that trade union representatives should be present at all hiring interviews. I will begin my speech by answering the question asked by the opposition: who does this benefit? Trade union representatives are more familiar with the country's labor laws. Trade unions have been the backbone of the labor movement, fighting for fair wages, safe working conditions, and respect for workers' rights. At the heart of this fight is the deep understanding of labor laws and workers' rights. This knowledge and expertise are crucial during the hiring process. When a trade union representative is present at a hiring interview, they bring with them a wealth of knowledge about labor laws and workers' rights. They understand the nuances of employment contracts, the intricacies of wage laws, and the importance of non-discriminatory policies. They can spot potential violations or unfair practices that may not be apparent, not only to the average job applicant, but to the employers as well. An example of this would be that not all employers or employees would know that temporarily employing someone under an internship for more than 6 years in one position is illegal. But their role goes beyond just spotting potential issues. They also ensure that these laws are upheld during the hiring process. They can ask pertinent questions, challenge unfair practices, and advocate for the applicant's rights. They can ensure that the employer is not just aware of these laws, but is actively adhering to them. This does not mean that they're responsible for who gets hired, or that the employer can or that the employer can't still choose the most qualified people, as the opposition keeps repeating, but they simply ensure that these processes are followed with integrity, fairness to the potential worker, and justice. This present is not just beneficial for the job applicant, but for the employer. It ensures that the company is compliant with labor laws from the very beginning, reducing the risk of legal issues later down the line. It promotes a culture of respect for workers' rights within the company. The opposition has also completely misunderstood what a trade union is. A trade union is formed with representatives of the company, and the representatives, trade union representatives, are members of the company who represent the company's internal issues. I'm able to say that in most instances, neither the prospective employer nor employee is familiar with the labor laws of this country. During the interview process, questions are asked which contravene the law. Even worse, some interviewers, instead of making an earnest effort to inquire into the qualification, experience, and competence of the interviewee, use the occasion to explore the possibility of establishing intimate relationship with the interviewee. If this fails, then the person is rejected. My illustrations are not only bad practice because they stand in the way of a potentially good employee being recruited, they are discriminatory and unlawful. If the interviewee successfully navigates the foregoing discriminatory barriers, they may be gently coerced into accepting jobs on unfavorable terms. This is readily so in a marketplace where good jobs are few and far between. Accepted.
I'm saying that you are saying that the trade union representative, work type of organization will be included in that and share this education in the interview?
Yes. The proposition, we assume that the trade union representative that would be present at these interviews would be senior representatives of this company. So by that time, they would be heavily, they would be heavily informed about the various laws. Oh, this is not a policy debate, so that really isn't relevant. In view of the obvious benefits that would flow from having trade union representatives on all interviews, it is my hope, and I look forward to the day when this becomes a universal practice, even if not required by the law. The proposition temporarily rests their case.
Thank you, third proposition speaker. We'll now take the contribution from the third opposition speaker.
Am I being heard? Am I being heard?
Yes, we're hearing you. Just elevate your voice some more so that we could hear you better.
Understood. Honorable Chairman, distinguished judges, esteemed
Give me
coaches,
one moment.
treasured
Give me one
teammates.
speaker. Speaker, give me one moment.
Pardon?
Judges, are you hearing? At some point, I was having a challenge hearing him.
Pardon?
He's low.
No?
Are you?
Very low and muffled.
Right.
Nothing.
Is there any kind of adjustment that you could make to enhance the audio?
I'm going to try from the secondary device and you can tell me if you're hearing better.
Right, because it's a stretch to hear you now.
Can you hear me now?
Not any significant improvement. Let's go again and see. We'll just have to make accommodation for you. Go ahead.
Understood. Honorable Chairman, distinguished judges, esteemed coaches, treasured teammates, and my unyielding opponent. As the third opposition speaker, I will expose the glaring flaws in the propositions that stand to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt.
Speaker, give me.
Trade union representative.
Speaker.
Interview is not only unprecedented,
Speaker.
but
Speaker.
there is no empirical evidence to suggest such a mandate, as the role of trade unions in the workforce has little
Speaker,
bearing
hey,
on the hiring.
speaker,
Now,
speaker, right, I think it would be a disservice to assess you with the quality audio right now
Pardon?
because
can't-
I'm not hearing
you're not hearing.
yeah, I'm unable to
Understood. You're not hearing.
make out what you're saying. I'm sure it's the same for the other judges. So we don't want it to be at a disservice. So is there any
Pardon?
other kind of is there any other
Are
kind?
you hearing me?
Yes, I am hearing you clearly.
Great, lovely. Give me a second, please.
Okay. And we will restart your time.
Thank you. Am I being heard now?
Much better. Okay.
That's
We'll put 5 minutes on the clock. We'll start your time again. Let's go.
Honorable Chairman, distinguished judges, esteemed coaches, treasured teammates, and my unyielding opponents. As the third opposition speaker, I will expose the glaring flaws in the proposition substantive to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that the inclusion of trade union representatives in hiring interviews is not only unprecedented, but completely illogical. There is no empirical evidence to necessitate such a mandate, as the role of trade unions in the workplace has little bearing on the hiring process. Now, to address the proposition's third speaker, you continue to reiterate the falsehood that trade unions are an internal body, but that is counter to the existence of the union that is to lobby for rights everywhere. If the trade union was a part of the company, how would they be able to lobby for external matters of internal disputes? Now, moving on to my substantive. Such a heavy-handed attempt at defending prospective employees would stifle candidates who perform better without a third party breathing down their neck. A study by Evers College found that 9 in 10 employed adults said that they had fears regarding the hiring process. And by introducing another element into the equation, you are compounding those potential fears. Your argument is built on the potential benefits of the trade union rep's involvement to the candidate, but you fail to realize that their very presence would be detrimental to a majority of those seeking employment. Global trade union representation would compromise the quality of the workforce, as mandatory handholding denies the
Point of information.
Accepted.
You've just asserted that adding another member into the equation would compound the fears of the worker. You haven't explained how it would. How would it compound the fears of the potential worker if the worker is getting someone who they can depend on to defend them in clarifying issues like labor rights?
I believe it was fairly evident. Even though they hold your best interest at heart, it's still another set of eyes that you have to account for. It's still another thing that can go wrong. It's another variable, and therefore would compound your potential fears. Moving on, global trade union representative would compromise the quality of the workforce, as mandatory handholding denies the applicants the chance to prove themselves as worthy candidates by impairing employers' ability to vet candidates on their own merit. On a fundamental level, job interviews should allow employers to gauge the aptitude of prospective hires by assessing their qualifications, behavioral patterns, and perceived levels of commitment. And the interference of the trade union representative would make it near impossible for candidates to make a case for themselves, as the interview goes from a conversation to a courtroom. Now, trade union representatives becoming a mandatory fixture of the hiring process would diminish the quality of interviews conducted. Candidates will be less willing to divulge sensitive or personal information in front of a third party that has no existing statutes in place to ensure the confidentiality of their information. This runs the risk of further degrading the line of communication between the candidate and the employee. Now, you seem to be under the belief that employers are autocratic by nature, but the hiring interview is an opportunity for candidates to build a bridge to their employer by forming meaningful
Points of
connections
information.
and reaching mutual understandings. And by obstructing these avenues for communication, you're effectively burning these bridges before they're even built. By including trade union representatives in the hiring process,
Let's pause the time. Trevon, let's pause the time for the speaker. I think the speaker's device has fallen off.
Seems he's muted.
Oh, he's
Apparently, they have two devices.
Okay. Let's give some time. Yes, speaker. No, we're not hearing you, speaker. Could you see? It seems like you are muted. Speaker, can you unmute?
Yes, apologies. We apologize for the technical difficulties, but as you previously stated, we have 3 minutes to connect, and so I don't expect a cut in time. Now, to continue, this runs the risk of further, you believe that employers are autocratic by nature, but the hiring interview is an opportunity. By including trade union representatives in the hiring process, you make it harder for employees to select candidates, harder for candidates to be employed, and jeopardize the existing operations of trade unions. Your failure to prove that the positives outweigh the negatives has forced me to repeat the sentiment of my first speaker. Who is this change for? It is outside the trade union's expertise, undermines the employer's authority, discredits the candidate's ability, but worst of all, it's counter to the purpose of hiring interviews on a fundamental level. The opposition momentarily rests.
Point of information.
All right, thank you, speakers. We will pause for 1 minute to allow the reply speakers to gather their thoughts before we take the opposition reply speaker, followed by the final speaker in the debate, the proposition reply speaker. So let's put 1 minute on the clock. Travon. So we will resume at the end of that 1 minute. All right, so the 1 minute has elapsed. We will now take the reply speeches and we will begin with the reply speaker from the opposition team. 3 minutes on the clock and points of information are not permissible. So you cannot ask the speakers who are giving the reply speeches points of information.
Am I being heard?
Yes, very clearly.
Good day again. The government is currently misleading the people they should serve. Let me begin by defining a trade union again. According to the United Kingdom Parliament, which my first speaker would have defined, is a trade union representative is an external advocate and advisor to colleagues who are already members of a union. You are just assuming that they work at an organization. But my opponents, even if they worked at the organization, do you really think another worker would supervise their senior in an interview? You are now also saying your first speaker made mention of discrimination, inequality, unfair, and I've used verbatim that Jamaica is grappling with corruption. What you don't realize is that your emphasis on the prevalence of unethical hiring is proof that your substantive will be inadequate in addressing the issue. It's as if you're placing a band-aid on a severed limb. If unethical hiring is an endemic in Jamaica, as you assume in the Jamaican workforce, how will a singular third party in the hiring process be able to mitigate somehow the corruption that you yield to? It is unable to address the existing corruption and inadequate in stopping the growing corruption. Yes, the trade union is beneficial to the common man, but corruption is an issue that can only be quelled by systematic change, which is far out of the reach of our argument. Government, we are talking about a hiring interview where an applicant goes forth to an interviewer to get a job, to assess their qualifications and skills, and to present themselves in a way to get a job. You are talking about a trade union representative to be there to educate them within an interview. How long do you think an interview takes for somebody from an external organization to inform, to be there, to advocate, and you're not yet a worker? Government, let us have sense, man.
Thank you, thank you, reply speaker from the opposition team. And we will now take the final speaker in the debate, the proposition reply speaker.
Ladies and gentlemen, we started this debate by explaining that the burden on either side is to show you why their world is better. The opposition's refusal to engage with our positive arguments shows that they've just come to argue why their world is good rather than why it is better than ours. It's amazing that they've really responded to none of what we've given you. And the only rebuttal they had within their constructive speeches for our speeches is to redefine what a trade union representative is. And at the point at which they disagree with our definition of union rep, they disagree with every single major international labor organization which acknowledges that a union rep is in fact a member of the company in question. They seem to be conflating a union rep with trade union. A union rep are the people, the union representatives are the people from the company which make up the external trade union. Regardless, the opposition has not engaged the clashes of this debate with we respond to their arguments about meritocracy and the importance of qualifications by saying that these very things are ignored in the status quo. We tell you that employers today ignore qualifications, don't hire the best workers for the job, favor their friends and cronies in all kinds of contexts. And we say that it is we who are in favor of meritocracy because we believe in ensuring the fairness of the interview process, limiting the discrimination that will prevent some workers from having a fair shot at the job, clarifying the information that regards things like labor laws, and ensuring that some people aren't unfairly excluded. Opposition's case has been a series of empty assertions. They assert that a trade union rep undermines qualifications because of their misunderstanding of the union rep's role. They assert that a trade union rep makes a worker more fearful without a single shred of explanation how. I mean, they just relied on the fact that workers are now scared of job interviews to say that any change in the process would make workers more scared. It's completely baseless. They say union reps would make the corruption process worse and didn't explain why. Now, the reply speaker does say that deep corruption in Jamaica requires systematic change, but not only do we wholeheartedly agree with that, but we posit that that's exactly what we're seeking. This change is systematic. It would happen in all contexts. What we would do is include another party at the table who would be able to be a watchdog against things like corruption, ensure fairness, and whose presence would build a harmony between trade unions and corporations. Let's quickly talk about what we gave you. We gave you this point about fairness. We gave you this point about fairness, that it would prevent things like cronyism and corruption, but it also prevent other kinds of unfair discrimination, and it would build the leverage that the potential employer has in the process. We gave you the argument about the harmonious relationship that this would create, the cordial relationship this would create by having another party at the table. And we talked about how this would improve efficiency, which has not been responded to. This would improve the efficiency of the process because quicker information could be had, quicker decisions could be made, and we would prevent litigations after the fact that would involve things like breaches of worker rights. So we have given you impactful arguments that address all the key actors of this debate: the workers, the potential workers, the employers, and the trade unions. We haven't relied on misunderstandings of the motion as opposition has, and we've explained to you why our side is better responding to the arguments that they've got. That's why we won.
Thank you, proposition reply speaker, and thank you to all the debaters. The judges will move to a breakout room to deliberate, and we will return with the results. But before you go, I just want to take the names of the speakers so that we can accurately complete the scoring sheet. So what's the name of the first proposition speaker?
Abraham Wall.
I'm sorry, you have to project your voice.
Abraham Wall.
Wall? Or could you put it in the chat? Could you just type it in the chat? Could you just go ahead and type your names and the the speaking positions that you're in, please? All speakers, you can go ahead and do that. Please, all speakers from both teams. In the meantime, judges, we will move to breakout room 8. That's breakout room 8, where we will have our deliberation. So the judges will move to breakout room 8 for the deliberation. And teams, please go ahead and put your speaking position and your full names in the chat. The Cartridge College. Oh, yeah, please go ahead and put the speaking positions and your names in the chat.
Okay, will do.
Yeah, I'm waiting on that information. Miss Hodges, we will go over to room 8. Chantel, we'll go over to room 8. Chantel? Oh, okay. Just waiting on the names from DC. Okay. Thank you. We'll be back momentarily. Trevon, are you over there?
Can you please repeat the question or statement you wanted? The information was sent in the WhatsApp group. In the Zoom chat, sorry. Are you able to see it?
Thank you, everyone. Ravan, can I go ahead? I should go ahead now. Do we give the feedback?
Indeed. You can go ahead and give feedback as well, Cleveland.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. We thought it was an interesting debate on the motion, on the moot. This House believes that a trade union should be present at hiring interviews. So the team winning this match is a team from Campion College on 245 points, and the team from DC putting up a valiant fight, ended on 234 points. How did the judges see the debate? It is important that we appreciate that in a debate, it is not sufficient to simply highlight what is good in your world, or simply highlight what are the benefits we get from the position that you take on a particular issue. It is important that you engage in a cross-sectional analysis in identifying and highlighting how your world is better than your opponent's world. So in this debate, we heard proposition articulating some benefits that we get when we have union reps present in the hiring process, in particular at interviews. And then on the other hand, we also heard from opposition some of the benefits that we get when the union reps are not present at the interviews. So to ensure that the debate is not parallel, it is important that you engage in an analysis that says why you get a better world from what I am trumping than, from what I'm proposing rather, than what you get from the other team's world. And I think that the team that was better able to engage in that kind of analysis was a team that would have emerged the winner. That was Campion College. So Campion College came and they highlighted to us that having union reps at the interviews in the hiring process has positive implications in that it can enhance the hiring process, in that it can ensure that the practices that obtain at interviews, the practices that obtain in the hiring process are consistent with standards and guidelines that have been set out in law. Proposition highlighted to us a challenge that obtains in the status quo. And that challenge is that oftentimes discrimination exists at the interview process, generally in the hiring process. And at that stage, there is no one who is really there to advocate for the rights of the potential worker or to ensure that the process is consistent and that there is no sort of corrupt practice that would take place at the interview stage. We thought that that was a convincing case that was not responded to by the opposition. However, what we got from opposition was the argument about concerns being raised about the sensitivity of the data, about the potential applicant that will now be exposed to someone who is a union rep. So opposition's entire case centered largely about the breach of privacy of this applicant who will now have his or her information be made available to someone who ought not to be in the hiring process, that is the union rep. But in the estimation of the panel, we questioned what is the gravity of having this sensitive data or this kind of information being exposed to a union rep. We didn't get that kind of analysis. So it is not sufficient in a debate to simply tell us that this harm emerges from the position that you take. But it is also important that you buttress that kind of argument with why it is so important that we ought to take into account this significant breach of the applicant's information, in that this harm outweighs whatever good that we get in the world being purported by proposition. That kind of analysis was absent. So in the absence of that kind of analysis, the panel had to take more convincingly the kind of benefits that we get, the enhancement of the hiring process, the ensuring that workers' rights are protected, the improved integration between workers and the trade union should that worker now become a part of the organization. Opposition also gave an argument that they sought to defend extensively, and it's about how having a union rep at the interview really sabotages the hiring process, and it really undermines the employer's determination of who is to be hired. I thought that the response, and the panel in general thought that the response to that major case from opposition was sufficient. The response from proposition, that is, was sufficient. In that, proposition articulated to us that if there's any kind of implication of a union rep being present, is that there will be an enhancement and not an undermining of the employer, in as much as the decision with respect to what kind of competency the individual who is applying for the job brings, that kind of assessment will be done by the employer. So the employer still reserves the prerogative to determine whether the skill sets of the individual aligns with the role that will be performed, whether the competencies of the individual aligns with the role that will be performed, and that the role of the union rep in this process is really to ensure that there is adherence to practices that are consistent with the protection of the workers' rights, the elimination of discrimination at that stage, which they highlighted occurs. So we have to ensure, and as a suggestion going forward, that we not just come to the debate with a pre-prepared speech, just presenting the benefits of what we are saying, but engage in how your benefits outweigh what they get, or in essence, how the harms that you are highlighting are so significant that they really ought not to be disregarded for the kind of benefits that the opposing team says that we get out of this kind of policy. Also, there was a clash on what a trade union is, a significant clash that had implications for the arguments in the debate. Proposition articulated, well, a union is not solely an external entity, that in many organizations, unions are internal groups that have been made up by the membership of that organization, the workers of that organization. Opposition had a different case. Opposition made it seem that broadly across the board, all trade unions are external entities, and therefore sensitive information for individuals will be given to external people. That again is not very accurate, and research and preparation for this debate would have revealed that oftentimes what obtains in organizations, especially small organizations, is that the unions are made up of the workers of that particular organization. So that again, as proposition highlighted, really relaxes the concerns that opposition raised about the sensitivity of employees' data being leaked to an external agent. So against the background, the backdrop of that kind of analysis, the panel was convinced that the team winning this debate is the proposition team from Campion College. Congratulations, Campion College, and well fought. A valiant effort was put up by the opposing team. Congratulations, everybody.
Thank you very much for that, Cleveland. And now that concludes this debate for the preliminary rounds of the JCSA High School Debate Competition 2023. I want to thank everyone who has participated. And we do again remind the teams that indeed the best two non-winning teams still get the chance to play off in the quarterfinals, which will be held on October 30th. So even if you have, so even if you have lost this match, that doesn't mean that you are out for the count. Congratulations again to the team, Campion College, and excellent attempt for the team, the Carteret College. Ladies and gentlemen, with that, we now conclude the preliminary rounds of the JCSA Debate Competition 2023. Have a lovely rest of your day.